Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the readings from our room. My name is Livia Meneghin. I'm a member of the board of the Writers' Room of Boston. I'm very delighted that you could join us this evening for our March edition in our virtual series, Readings from the Room. For anyone new, welcome. The Writers' Room of Boston is a co-working space in downtown Boston for any and all writers, established and emerging, who want or need a quiet place to write 24 hours a day, 24/7. It's super awesome. We've been serving writers of the greater Boston area since 1993. During and since the pandemic, the room offers online resources, including this reading series, as well as online writing groups with prompts and discussions. Last year, we inaugurated a series of interviews with guests knowledgeable about topics such as getting your work to a publisher, agents, and guidance for online publishing. Please contact us if you're curious or have any questions about the room and its programs at info@writersroomofboston.org. I'll put all this information in the chat in just a moment. You can also check out our Facebook and Instagram posts at Writers of Boston. We always welcome new folks into our community and have different levels of membership, including a virtual membership, a weekend membership, and our fellowship. So if you're interested, again, I will provide all of that contact fun info in the chat. I'm very bad at multitasking, so I'll do it in just a second. In 2021, we launched this reading series as a way to reach out to the writing community during the pandemic and share wonderful writing representing a range of genres. This series is made possible by grants from the Mass Cultural Council, the Boston Cultural Council, and we also rely on friends. So if you enjoy this event, please consider making a contribution using the donate button on our website. Also, we'll be recording this reading, and a replay will be available on our website. There are recordings of past events as well. Tonight we have two readers, Michael Glenn and Spencer Storey Johnson. As we go along this evening, feel free to use the question and answer feature in the box at the bottom of the screen, where you can type in your questions, and we'll have time for a discussion at the end. So without further ado, our first reader is Michael Glenn. So I will welcome him and introduce him. Michael Glenn is a retired physician living in Medford. He's published stories in the Hudson Review and the Antioch Review. Glenn also published two collections of short stories, Trouble on the Hill from Liberator Press, and last year, Selected Stories by Grey Dove Press, excuse me. Having worked both as a family physician, psychiatrist, and political activist, he has published several nonfiction books in the fields of medicine and therapy, and I'm super excited to learn more about his work. So, Michael, thanks for being here, and take it away.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to read some stories from, it's backwards, of course, my book, Selected Stories, which was published last year. If you're interested, you can get it on Amazon. And I'm going to read excerpts from different stories just to give you a sense of the different styles, because this collection contains works which have been written at various times. So I'll start with one early story that's called, coincidentally, The Room. This is how it begins. I am sitting at my desk. The window is to my right. Through it, I can see the street and the apartment house across the street. When my shades are up, I can see the top floor of the building. But when they are half down, as they are now, I can only see the bottom two stories and half of the third one. I haven't yet met any of the people across the street. I haven't yet been out of my room, not since I entered it, not since I paid the old lady her rent for a month in advance and moved in with my groceries. One large rectangle of glass forms the lower half of the window, but the upper half, the half covered by the torn yellow shade, is composed of 6 smaller rectangles of dirty glass. There is a crack in the very top frame to the right, but since the shades are halfway down, I can't see the crack now, and it is just as good that way. I'm sure I would feel a draft on my neck from the crack if I could see it, but now that I cannot see it, I'm sure that there is no draft in the room. It is cold. It is almost December. When I came here with my groceries, the landlady made a joke about Thanksgiving, and I laughed. But I had no turkey. I don't celebrate holidays. Every day is like the one before it to me. But that is beside the point. What matters is that it is cold. Perhaps there is no heat. If the old landlady thinks I shall put up with no heat during the coldest months of the year, she is wrong. When I see her, I shall speak to her. I shall tell her that it is cold in my room. I shall not laugh at her jokes unless she promises to warm the room. I must make a note of that. But of course, she will probably say that the heat is already on, and that it must be a crack in one of my windows that's causing my room to be cold. What will I say to her then? What could I answer without affirming that indeed there is a crack in the uppermost right pane of the window, the one which is covered by shades now? I had best not mention it at all. If I ask her to fix the window, she will become angry. She will stalk about my room, waving her arms about. I do not want that. I shall say nothing to her then. I shall pretend I do not see her if she comes. I shall lock the door. But all this is beside the point. I was talking about the room. So that's an early work, a little bit influenced by some of the French fiction I was reading at the time. Now I'm going to read the beginning of a story called Jackie, which is a medical story, and you'll get a sense of it. September. Luke Shands, a third-year medical student, stands in the 9 East Nurses Station looking out. The ward has 18 beds, 8 on either side of a broad corridor, and his new patient, Jackie Serrano, is at the far end, asleep, an oxygen mask over her face, intravenous fluids running into each arm. She's come in the previous night, coughing and severely short of breath. Her chart says she's 17, but she's already been hospitalized many times over the past several years. Her pediatrician diagnosed cystic fibrosis when she was 5. The disease didn't affect her badly until she was 13, but over the past 4 years, her condition has worsened. Luke walks to her bed. She's lying still, breathing deeply, a frail, gaunt girl with long brown hair and hollow cheeks. The chart says she weighs 91 pounds. He touches her shoulder. Miss Serrano, Jackie. She stirs, wakes up, coughs. What? What do you want? Her voice is weak, husky. I'm Luke Shands, a medical student. I'm supposed to examine you? He says it like a question. Could you come back later? I'm real tired now. She coughs again. He stands beside her, hearing the rattle of her breathing. Sure, I'll come back later. Later that morning, the patient next to Jackie begins to moan. The nurse calls Luke and the intern. When Luke arrives, the woman's face is purple and she's struggling to breathe. While Luke and the intern are examining her, Jackie starts crying. Luke goes over to calm her down, but she's shaking all over. The intern pulls the curtain between the 2 beds shut and tells Luke to stay with the girl. In the meantime, the nurse has called a code. It's clear to Luke that the woman in the next bed is fighting for her life. He sits with Jackie, talking to her quietly, but she remains distraught. He strokes her hand and tells her to breathe slowly. There's a lot of activity behind the curtain, urgent, agitated voices, carts rolling back and forth, people running in and out, the thwack of a defibrillator. Sitting up, Jackie presses her thin arms against her chest and rocks back and forth, panic on her face. 30 minutes go by. The noises stop. The carts rattle away. The staff leaves. The patient has died. The intern pulls the curtain open again. The area is clear, the bed empty, the body gone. Jackie is still trembling. She pulls her blankets over her head and moans, "No more, no more." "What is it?" Luke says. "Are you afraid?" "No more, no more." She won't say anything else. After another half hour, Jackie finally calms down. She falls asleep with an odd smile on her face. Luke, feeling worn out, and leave. There are a number of stories that are reflective, looking back stories. This is one called Davidoff. It begins like this. It's 6:15 on a cool September morning. Maple leaves are rustling in the wind, and maple branches are rubbing against the side of Howard Zinman's house. Indoors, Dr. Zinman is dawdling over coffee, not yet ready to begin his daily routine of hospital rounds, office hours, and phone calls. He scans the Times, half listening to the Haydn Symphony on the radio. After the front page and international news, he leafs through the business, sports, and food sections. Feeling sluggish, he can't stop fussing with his paper or get up from his seat. He picks up the first section again. Zinman is a paunchy man in his early 40s, with graying temples, horn-rimmed glasses, and thin lips. He's dressed in his doctor clothes, a white shirt, striped tie, and dark blue pants, his jacket hanging on the back of his chair. His wife and 2 children are asleep upstairs. As he turns to the obituary page, a familiar name makes him pause. Saul Davidoff, 62, psychiatrist, was director of Beachmont Mental Health Center. There's a photo. Davidoff hasn't changed. It's the same cherubic face, the boyish lock of hair over his right temple, the half-smirking smile, the rhomboid nose jammed unexpectedly between expressive, searching eyes, the sensual lower lip. Zinman suddenly recalls Davidoff as he was when he first saw him, 19 years ago, when Davidoff was the bright young man in Manhattan Medical School's Department of Psychiatry, and Howard a second-year medical student. So that story goes on. I'll now read you a piece from the middle of a story. It's called Piano Lesson, and it's about a adolescent boy who takes piano lessons from a Mr. Carroll, and the student before him is named Karen. This is in the middle. One Wednesday in June, I got to Mr. Carroll's house early, about 3:45. It had been a rainy, stormy day, and I was drenched. My sweater smelled like a wet dog. My books were soaked, and the water was trickling down my face. I hung my dripping coat in the closet, happy to be in a warm, dry place, and sat down on my chair. Karen was working on a Mozart sonata. "Can I use the pedal here, Mr. Carroll?" she piped. "No, Karen, no, just play the legato as it's written." "But doesn't it sound better with the pedal?" "Karen, if Mozart had wanted the pedal, he'd have written it that way." "Okay." A pause. "Do you think Mozart was a happy man, Mr. Carroll?" "Without a doubt, Karen, without a doubt." "Do you think he ever wondered when to use the pedal?" "I think Mozart always knew when to use the pedal," Mr. Carroll said. "And he knew what fingers to use all the time, too, didn't he?" Karen said. Mr. Carroll didn't answer. Carroll played some more, and then he stopped her. No, here it's staccato," he said. "Tep, tep, 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 you see?" He played it for her. She began the piece again. A few minutes later, I heard her again. "Mr. Carroll, can I play this with my 4th finger, or do I have to use my pinky?" "Karen, use the fingering we wrote down on your score." "Okay." Suddenly, the door to the hallway opened, and Nora Carroll entered, wearing her dark green frock, her hair frizzed about her face, a glass of lemonade in each hand. She nodded at me without speaking. I was there before the hour, therefore not really there, and walked to the studio doors, her shoes clicking on the parquet floor. "Jeremy? Karen," she called. "Would you like some lemonade?" The music stopped. The doors opened, and Mr. Carroll looked out. "What?" "Oh, Nora, that would be lovely." Nora Carroll stepped inside the studio and handed them each a glass and a cork coaster, then took a single step back towards the sliding doors. I sensed an eerie tension between the man and his wife. It was like I'd come into a play several minutes past the opening and found the plot already in midstream. There was something strained in her voice, something taut, which made me wonder if they'd been fighting. And Nora Carroll was hesitating too long on the threshold. So I'll stop there. Thanks for listening. I hope you found this interesting. And if you do, check out Selected Stories on Amazon. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. I look forward to our Q&A so I have a lot of questions. And just a reminder to folks to, if you have comments or questions, feel free to use the Q&A for the questions, and then you can use the chat for comments. Our next reader is Spencer Storey Johnson. I'll have him join us. Spencer Storey Johnson is a writer, artist, and educator from the Pacific Northwest, currently living and working in Massachusetts. His writing has appeared in Adelaide Magazine, 34th Parallel, Pioneer Town, and Cult Magazine. And I believe we have some fun new things that we're going to hear from as well. So, Spencer, take it away.
Thanks, Liv. Yeah, I will first ask you all to excuse my voice as I am getting over the flu, but happy to be here nonetheless, and happy to share a short story that was published in Pioneer Town, and then a couple of poems as well. This story was a challenge to myself, written in the form of a will. I wanted to write something that was unconventional in form and tone, so it was intended to be comedic as well as strangely structured when you approach it visually, but I will read it for you now. It is titled The Last Will and Testament of Myrtle Evelyn Cooper. I, Myrtle Evelyn Cooper, nee Hartman, of 7649 West Shore Drive, Egg Harbor, Wisconsin, previously of Worcester, Massachusetts, who only moved to Wisconsin for my first husband and couldn't be bothered to move again once he died, declare this to be my last will and testament, and hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils, so Ronald might as well burn that useless piece of paper he's got. It won't hold up in court. Article 1. Funeral expenses and payment of debts. All funeral arrangements have been made and expenses have been paid, so there is no need for my family to concern themselves or muck up my plans. I have purchased a personal plot in Lakeview Cemetery and have sold my portion of the couple's plot, purchased by my third husband, Harold Shaw, as I had little desire to sleep with him in life and no desire to do so for eternity. All enforceable and unsecured debts are to be paid out of my estate. These debts do not include payments to scammers, moochers, or layabouts. Article 2. Money and personal property. Legacies. My financial assets, with 2 exceptions, will be divided among my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and other family members. The allotments will be based on the final version of my ranking system, the sole copy of which has already been delivered to my executor. Those with 5 stars will receive a larger percentage, 4 stars commensurately less so, and so on, with 1-star ranked people receiving the smallest percentages. The first exception is $20 to be paid to my dear friend, Ruby Salazar. In 1991, I lent her money that she never paid back, so I leave this to her in case she needs a little bit more. The second exception is my youngest sibling, Ronald Matthew Hartman, 0 stars, who shall receive a total of $1 minus postage. Bequests. My mother's ring, an heirloom passed from mother to daughter for 6 generations, shall go to my granddaughter, Alexa Warden, under the condition that her mother, who twice tried to steal it from my finger as I slept, never get her hands on it. To my eldest daughter, Millicent Warden, I leave the remaining canned goods in my pantry. If she wants an heirloom so bad, she can have beans. To my eldest son, Bernard Cooper, I leave the furniture constructed by his father. It has all been disassembled by an expert and boxed together for easy transportation. No instructions for reassembly will be provided. To my youngest daughter, Candace Tedeschi, I leave the garden gnome that sat by my driveway for 37 years. She ran over the original with her car and thought she had convincingly replaced it with the current, inferior gnome. To my youngest son, Maxwell Shaw, I leave my 2022 Subaru Outback and my collection of Christmas ornaments, which he on several occasions and within earshot referred to as tacky and tasteless, on the condition that the ornaments be displayed visibly for each Christmas for 10 years following my death. My executor has been instructed to check in and repossess the car if necessary. Finally, upon the recent discovery of a scheme to claim my possessions before I'd gone, involving color-coded stickers hidden surreptitiously on objects throughout my home, I have decided that the remainder of my tangible properties shall be distributed on the following terms. Those who did not participate, primarily my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, the dears, will be given 24 hours unaccompanied in the house to claim whatever they wish. My son Maxwell, who despite his participation revealed the details of the scheme and its participants to me, and his husband Robert Porter will be given 24 hours to do the same. The participants of the plot may pick over whatever is left. All claims will be reported to and recorded by my executor, who will arrange for distribution and monitor the process. Article 3. Real estate. In my final years, I have heard many pleas and bribes from my children and siblings for the home at 7649 West Shore Drive. After giving it due consideration, the property will be divided among them as follows. To my daughter Millicent, I leave the front and back doors, all interior doors, and all interior doors, including hardware. To my son Bernard, I leave the windows, curtains, and accompanying hardware. To my daughter Candace, I leave the refrigerator, range, microwave, and dishwasher to be removed and reinstalled at her own expense. To my son Maxwell, I leave all fixtures, faucets, sinks, tubs, and toilets. To my youngest sister, Ethel, I leave the hardwood floors, all cabinets, the exterior siding, and roofing tiles. To my brother Ronald, I leave the gutted shell. If these divisions are not satisfactory, I have left instructions for the property to be donated to the local fire department that they might burn it down for training purposes. Article 4. Residuary clause. I leave the remainder of my estate to my executor. They may do with it what they wish, and have been given my permission to claim any bequests or legacies unclaimed or rejected by the recipients. Article 5. Taxes. All estate, inheritance, and succession taxes, including any interest and penalties, payable by the reason of my death, are to be paid in equal shares by my siblings and children. My grandchildren and great-grandchildren are not to be burdened with such expenses from my gifts. Article 6. Minors. If under this will any property shall be payable outright to a person who is a minor, my executor may, without court approval, defer payment of such property until the minor reaches the age of the majority as defined by their state of residence. Under no circumstances should the parent or guardian of the minor be allowed to claim bequests or legacies on their behalf. Article 7. Fiduciaries. Finally, I appoint my second husband, Francesco Moretti, always my favorite, as the executor of my will and estate. He isn't related to any of the rest of you by blood, and I know I can trust him to carry out my wishes. If he is unable or unwilling to act in this capacity, or resigns, I appoint his sister, Nicoletta Moretti, with whom I had a brief but exquisite affair in 1976. My executor shall have all powers allowable under the laws of this state, and has been granted the additional power to enforce all conditions and stipulations of the will as they see fit. I have signed this will as of blank day of blank month of 2023, signed and declared by Myrtle Evelyn Cooper on blank, to be her will and under no external pressures in our presence, who at her request in her presence and in the presence of each other, all being present at the same time, have signed our names as witnesses. Francesco Moretti and Nicoletta Moretti. So the challenge to tell a story in an unconventional form is sort of a fun one that I like from time to time. And that one was well received at Pioneer Town, as it's become one of my own favorites. The next thing I will read for you all is a couple of short poems. The first one, a little bit of context, there is a gentleman by the name of Erling Kage. He is a Norwegian explorer and adventurer and philosopher and writer, still around today, but he has walked across both poles from of the planet a number of times, I think somewhere like 36 or something like that, and asked in an interview how he kept himself going in some of the most dramatic environments on our planet. He offered this advice, which I turned into a poem. So the poem is titled Advice from a Man Who Walked Across the Poles, after Erling Kage. Breathe and move at the pace of your own soul. Breathe deep, move your body, keep pace with your soul. Move your breath, soothe your soul. Own your movement, pace, breath, soul. Move, pace, breathe, soul. Breathe and move at the pace of your soul. Breath is motion in no particular direction. Pace is not pulse. Soul is not desire. Breathe at your own pace. move your soul. I breathe and move at the pace of my soul. And then if I've got time, I'll read one last poem for you. This one's very short, and I don't think it needs much explanation. It is titled Tumble Heart. I fall in love. I fall in pain, wonder, anger, joy, worry. I fall at the drop of autumn leaves and spring rain, at the crack of the spine, at the key change, at the first bite and burst. I fall without remorse, without structure, without end, without self. Well, that's a lie. I always falls with self. I fall for a soft new leaf, for a sip of dark coffee, for a postcard from afar, for everything, dear reader, and for you. Thank you very much. This was a delight.
Thank you, Spencer. I loved hearing the poetry. Michael, why don't you come on back as well? And then we have a few minutes for a little discussion. Maybe it'll go a little longer than 7:30, but I'd like to prioritize the panel, the audience questions. And then I always ask, this is becoming a tradition. I always ask one question at the very end to everyone that I've hosted. So Spencer, there's a question for you in the chat, kind of about the inspiration for the story. You mentioned it being a challenge, like a writing challenge, but what about like maybe Evelyn is referring to the content, or if you could tell us just more about how it came to be.
Yeah, it came to be initially as part of my thesis at Emerson College. I wanted to challenge myself to write a bunch of different stories, completely as much different from each other as they could be, on the theme of death. That was, for some reason, this theme I chose. And one of the challenges that I've had on the list for a long time when I came to write this story was to write a funny story about death. There are plenty of funny stories about death, but I wanted to write one that was um, unlike anything I had read before. And so I don't remember how I ended up researching wills, but I was, and found the form quite humorous because all the legalese sort of obscures things. And so it obscures the things that are really happening behind the scenes. And it made for a nice story that way.
Can I say something about that story?
Yeah.
I was really impressed that the voice carried so well. And the voice, in some strange way, reminded me of the voice in the room. It was surly, curmudgeonly, obsessional, kind of very detail oriented. I just wondered, I just wondered how similar these narrators sounded.
Mm,
Yeah, that was I thought of that as well. It is kind of remarkable. It's a fun character to write. It's a fun kind of voice to be in a way.
yeah. I actually have something of a follow-up question for Michael. There was a conversation in the Q&A, a question that was answered. I kind of have a follow-up. Have you ever used people in your profession or your life as inspiration for any of the stories or the characters, or is it very much like a separate thing in your brain or and even in your routine? Or you mentioned the coming from the same interests in people's stories, but I wonder if you poets steal from real life all the time. So I guess I'm wondering if you will admit that if you steal from real life too.
Well, I wouldn't call it steal. I don't think I ever write a story without having a strong feeling. There has to be something about a character or situation that gives me a very strong feeling. And frequently that's inspired by, real people, real experiences, and so on. I don't steal from um,
You don't
people
have to use
that
that
I,
word.
yeah, I don't take from people that I saw in my psychiatric practice. I don't do that.
That's funny.
But I mean, all the stories have a little kernel of something that I experienced, which then expands into a story, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah. There's another quick question for Spencer in the chat. I don't know if you can see it, about the backstory for the poem about breathing.
Yeah, and the title of it is Advice from a Man Who Walked Across the Poles. Um, yeah, I came across an interview with him on a podcast I was listening to a number of years ago at this point, and it actually took me a long time to track it down again because I thought it was a different person that I was referencing. But I managed to sort it all out. And yeah, he's a really interesting person, and he has a really interesting outlook on life, despite having put himself through these extremes. And nothing in my life is as extreme as walking across the South Pole or the North Pole solo. I've never done anything like that. I don't plan to do anything like that. But I've had my own struggles with things, particularly with my mental health, and I found that phrase, breathe and move at the pace of your own soul, to be a very powerful mantra or kind of repetitive phrase for myself. And when I started trying to write some poetry the last few months, of course, it came back to me, and it made sense to try to write a poem about.
Great, thanks. I'll finish up with my my traditional question. Do each of you have a reading recommendation or a favorite? You know, what are you reading right now, even if it's not a favorite? I'm going to share the wealth, the literary wealth.
Well, I can answer. I'm reading The Kiss of the Spider Woman in Spanish and English. And I'm also reading a book called 100 Years of something like 100 Years of War in Palestine, which is a great book about what's been going on in the Middle East for 100 years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
I will recommend two books as well. I just finished reading The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Really great novels, very strange novel, but also because it takes place from November 2019, I think, to November 2020. It's a really tense real life time that is not just the backdrop of this story, but a real part of the life of these people that is reckoned with. And but it's also beautifully funny, and has a remarkably hopeful ending, which I really liked.
Nice.
Yeah, and then the other book I will recommend is Erling Kagge's, the Norwegian philosopher and adventurer. His book Walking, I'm reading right now, and it is I mean, I picked up the book because I was writing this poem and because I wanted to better understand what he got out of walking in that process. And he talks a lot about how we learn to walk and how we walk throughout our lives and how that changes, how that access and ability is something that we often take for granted, and how it manipulates time for us and all that stuff.
Thank you. We're out of time, so thank you both again, Michael and Spencer, for offering your words to us this evening. For everyone in the audience, including our readers, we have our next edition of the Readings from the Room next month on Tuesday, April 30th. So we welcome you all. We'll have two featured readers as well, Sonia Agarwal and Heather Wright, two poets, Boston-based poets. So we're super excited to hopefully see you again in a month. I also just added to the chat once more our fellowship application FAQ. Our fellowship closes at the end of the month, which is very soon. So you don't want to have an April Fool's. You want to get that in if you are interested, and you're welcome to contact us if you have any questions. So have a good night. Enjoy the rest of March and this weird, warm yet also cold sometimes weather if you're in the Boston area. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks, everyone.